Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Power Leader podcast, where we talk about the truth behind leadership. The truth most people are too afraid to say out loud. Today's episode is one every chief executive officer, every board member, every founder, and every executives need to hear. Because the biggest cybersecurity risk in your organizations are not the ones in your dashboard, not the ones in your annual reports, and they are definitely not the ones your vendors are selling you tools to fix. The biggest risk are the ones no one is telling the CEO. Let's get into it. One of the most dangerous risks in cybersecurity is executive overconfidence. Not because leaders are careless, but because they are being fed a curated version of the truth. Here is the reality. Most CEOs believe their organization is more secure than it actually is. Most CISOs feel pressured to present green dashboard. Most boards do not know what question to ask. And most breaches happen in companies that thought they were secure. Trust me, we have senior leaders in cybersecurity and compliance who do not know what risk appetite, risk tolerance, and a heat map even means. And that gap is more dangerous than any external threat. Here, the problem is not the threat landscape, it is the leadership landscape. Do you know what is the green dashboard paradox? Cybersecurity dashboards were designed to measure activity, but some leaders think they measure risk. So, they show things like patch status, vulnerability metrics, alert numbers, complaint scores. But what they don't show is business exposure, identity compromise, AI driven attacks, third party risk. So, a company can look perfectly secure while attackers are already inside. Trust me, too many cybersecurity and compliance leaders still run a checklist-driven culture built on chained policies, catered tools, and certification-focused controls. And when leaders treat cybersecurity as paperwork instead of a business enabler, any truly experienced professional can see the immaturity of the organization in how it operates, leaving chief executive officers and board with a critical governance question. How do you trust leaders who confuse compliance activity with actual protection of your assets? Let me tell you about a case study. I'm sure that you all heard about SolarWinds, right? SolarWinds was trusted by governments, Fortune 500 companies, and critical infrastructure. They had certificates, they had audits, they had green dashboards, and yet attackers lived inside their environment for more than 40 months before detection. And what is the lesson? Compliance is not security. Dashboards are not the truth. And confidence is not protection. I believe artificial intelligence has changed cyber risk more in recent years. But here is what chief executive officers and board are not being told. As much as AI is helping us to automate our workflows and our efforts, same time, I believe attackers can now generate malware, phishing emails, and social engineering script at a scale. Deep fake fraud is exploding. Now, we have cases where chief financial officers wired millions because they heard what they thought was the CEO's voice. And let me tell you about a case study, the deep fake CEO scam. In 2023, a finance employee in Hong Kong joined a video call with what looked like their entire leadership team. Every face was deep fake. Every voice was AI generated. They wired 25 million US dollar. This is not science fiction. AI makes the insider threat easier. A disgruntled employee no longer needs technical skill. AI will write the exploit for them. If you think about the regulations, AI is outpacing them. NIST, the European AI Act, and the White House executive order are trying to catch up. But attackers don't wait for the policy. And what is the truth? AI is the new cyber weapon. And most executives are still treating it like a productivity tool. Yes, of course, it can help with productivity. But as every coin has two sides, it has two sides too. And there is a silent killer. Do you know who? The third party risk and the supply chain risk. Trust me, guys, too many cybersecurity and compliance leaders still operate from templates, familiar tools, and the narrow set of controls they already understand. Yet, in a threat landscape where emerging vulnerabilities, not known ones, drive the highest enterprise risk, chief executive officers and the board must confront a critical governance question. Can you trust leaders who manage their comfort zones instead of preparing the organization for the future, for the unknown? Here is the risk no one wants to admit. Your cybersecurity is only strong as the least mature vendor in your ecosystem. And most organizations have hundreds of vendors, maybe thousands, no visibility, no continuous monitoring, no strong contractual enforcement, no real offboarding process. Do you remember the Move It breach on 2023? A single file transfer tool used by thousands of organizations was compromised. And the result? 2,600 plus organizations impacted, 90 plus million individuals affected, healthcare systems disrupted, not because they were breached, but because a vendor was. And this is exactly why supply chain risk is now a top priority in SEC cybersecurity rules, NIST 2.0, CISA's new directives, global regulatory frameworks. But most chief executive officers and board still don't know which vendors have access to what data. Many cybersecurity and compliance leaders continue onboarding hundreds of tools and services without long-term vision, driven more by title, ego, and inflated self-image than by strategy, raising a critical governance question. Is introducing more risk and hiring more people to manage it a strategy or a symptom of weak leadership? And how long can chief executive officers trust leaders who lack true business acumen to protect the organization's assets? You know, executives are told insider threats are malicious actors. But the truth, most insider threats are emotional, not malicious. They come from burnout, retaliation, fear, psychological safety breakdowns, toxic leadership, poor communication, lack of recognition, overwhelming change fatigue. Let me tell you a case study. A Tesla employee leaked 100 GB of data, not for money, not for espionage, but out of frustration and retaliation. Culture is a cybersecurity control. Leadership is a cybersecurity control. Psychological safety is a cybersecurity control. But nobody tells this to the CEO or to the board. In many large organizations, we watch toxic cultures take root under a narcissistic, ego-driven leader. So, the real governance question for every chief executive officer becomes this. How do you trust the very leaders who create psychological insecurity to protect your organization from insider threats born from the environment they themselves designed? Let's talk about the regulations. Regulations are no longer check the box. They now carry personal liability, criminal exposure, public disclosure requirements, board accountability, and real-time reporting obligations. CEOs and board must disclose material cyber incident within 4 business days. Report cybersecurity governance annually, demonstrate board oversight, and show how cyber risk ties to strategy. And what does this mean? Cybersecurity is now a fiduciary duty, not an IT function, not a technical issue, but a leadership obligation. NIST 2.0 shifts from technical controls to organizational maturity. And EU NIS2 directive requires executive level accountability and can impose personal fines. FTC safeguard rule applies to non-bank financial institutions and requires leadership involvement. And here is the risk nobody wants to say out loud. Cyber literacy in the C-suite is now a national security risk. Executives don't need to be technical, but they must be literate because decisions about AI, cloud, data privacy, vendor risk, incident response, budget allocation, governance, all those cannot be made blindly. Do you remember the MGM resort attack on 2023? A social engineering attack shut down slot machines, hotel check-ins, digital keys, reservation system, and the attackers used LinkedIn to impersonate an employee and call the help desk. This was not a technical failure. This was a governance failure. Here is the truth all the chief executive officers and boards need to hear. The biggest cybersecurity risks are not the ones in your tools. The biggest cybersecurity risks are the risk you don't see, the risk no one tells you, the risk hidden in your culture, the risk buried in some of your supply chain, and the risk accelerated by AI, and more importantly, the risk created by leadership blind spots. Cybersecurity is no longer about firewalls and patches. It is about clarity, governance, emotional intelligence, and executive maturity. So, the question for leaders is not, is our dashboard green? But the real question is, do we truly understand our cyber risk? Because the truth is simple. Cybersecurity is a leadership discipline. And the organization understand this will survive the next decade. Thank you for listening. If this episode challenged you, share it with a leader who needs to hear the truth. This is the Power Leader Podcast. Signing off, Dia.